Welcome everybody to the publication of the 2016 Australian Benchmark Initiative. I'd like to thank you all today for being on the webinar. My name is Jamie McBrien. I'm a Director of Optum2 and Opti BPO. And I'd also like to thank our other sponsor, the Australian Payroll Specialists. Look, the agenda that we're going to go through today, I want to give you a bit of an overview of what it is that we did, the method that we went through, some of the 2016 results, and some of the next steps from here around report distribution, report cards and talk a little bit about the 2017 study. Just a quick reminder in relation to our sponsors, which we thank very much. Optum2 is a management consultancy focused solely on the finance organisation, helping assess and improve finance operating models, process and structure. Opti BPO, which helps Australian and New Zealand companies offshore back office and finance activities to the Philippines, and the Association for Payroll Specialists, the largest group representing the payroll industry here in Australia. Thank you. So a bit of an overview of what it is that we've done this year and what we've gone through to get to where we are. Why did we start this? We started this around 5 or 6 years ago now, and look, a lot of these things haven't really changed in the intervening period, which is quite interesting in itself. Most of the finance benchmarks have previously been US sourced and not necessarily as relevant for Australia. There's been some attempts at Australian benchmarks, but with a lack of ongoing renewal, and there's limited opportunity to share better practice on finance operations amongst Australian companies. So now entering our 6th year, we think we've rapidly become the leading source of finance benchmarks and better practice in Australia. So the objective, and this objective hasn't really changed over the last 6 years, is to build a set of finance benchmarks and facilitate the sharing of finance better practice between Australian companies. And one of the things that we would like to get better at is helping work with you to get other groups together to share some of this information, findings and opportunities, because through that we can all improve. What was the method that we went through as part of the study for this year? We collected a whole lot of data through a survey-based approach. We went through that data and we reviewed it for reasonableness. There's always some outliers and some interesting information that comes back to us. We've gone out there and checked some of those things when they've seemed a little bit out and gone back and validated. We've then added some analysis and expertise around that and had a look at it all and thought about our understanding of what's happening in the market, as well as some of the results that have come back, with the intention of ending up with what we think and what we hope you agree is a high quality report with detailed analysis. The timeline, we kicked it off in September 2016. We spent up until the end of the year collecting data and information, and then over the intervening period leading up to today, we've pulled that all together into the publication of the reports that some of you will be receiving following this webinar. The number of participants we've been quite impressed with. The first year we did this, we said, look, if we can get 20 companies participating, we'd be pleased. We've slowly built on that. We had some meteoric rises early on and slowed down a bit, as you'd expect from there. But we've got around 91, or not around, we have actually 91 Australian and New Zealand companies participating this year, which again, we're pretty pleased about in terms of that number. Look, we're not only pleased with the number, it's all nice to say, well, we've got 91 companies participating, but we think that we've got a good quality, not only quantity of respondent. If we look across the board at the number of respondents for each study, now their revenues are around the 800 million mark, their employees around 1,200, and a percentage of them are ASX listed, with the rest being multinational, private, and other, some public sector in there as well. So we think we've got a good breadth of medium to large Australian businesses, which is the focus of these studies, and as a result, we think that the insights that we've gathered are really do have credence. In terms of the structure, each of the reports, we wanted to gather the same thing for each of the areas under study. We want to understand a little bit about the company, how you run your organisation, how the process looks from a maturity perspective, where you're going in the future, and of course the benchmarks that go with that. Important for us is that we want to understand that linkage between what makes a good result and how does that look from a process perspective. Jumping into the 2016 results then, which is what you're all here for today. Looking at the management environment across the respondent companies that participated, again, as we've seen in previous years, most of you have gone out and built a centralised shared service. Receivables are still the most decentralised. You're talking around customer service requirements. and offshoring outsourcing has grown from a base of 0 to an area that's increasing in interest as time goes on, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future. In terms of standardized processes, you can see there in the light blue versus the dark blue, most of organizations have got to a standardized process across the transactional areas, with receivables being the least standardized. So we can see that we're moving here to a point where most companies are driving things in a similar manner across their businesses. In terms of SLAs though, while you're getting to standard processes, only about half of you have SLAs in place with the business. Those with SLAs in place though have indicated there's opportunities for improvement. We talked to a few people around the fact that they might have SLAs in place, they're not well communicated and or they're not held to or not agreed with the organisation. So potentially some improvements there around setting expectations around the finance organisation. Jumping into the functional analysis then, we're going to talk through each of the different areas that we've studied over the last year to give you some analysis and insights of our thinking. The first area that I'd like to talk about is around purchase to pay. These are some of the areas of purchase to pay that we looked at and give you some observations on that. Around P2P, some of the key findings, and when you get the reports themselves, in the webinar today, it's a fairly high-level view of some of the observations we've made. The reports themselves have a whole lot more detail in them around better practice, analysis and insight. Only around half of you had standard trading terms, which is really a fairly easy win when we look at that working capital management cycle. Of those that did though, overwhelmingly standard terms were 30 days. I know there's a few of you out there with 45 days, and I know one or two of you with 45 days end of month, and good luck if you can push your suppliers to that extent. But it seems as though the Australian standard is 30 days. Why bother? Working capital management, there's some easy wins to be had in pushing everyone as much as possible to standard terms. It also establishes a mutual obligation. If we all know when our suppliers are going to pay us, we all have a good understanding of that. And it avoids us manipulating that cash flow piece, so we can have a good idea of when money's coming out and reconcile that to when money is coming in. A high utilisation of purchase orders. This is something that we've seen improve over the last 5 or 6 years. Most of you now have purchase orders in place. A lot of those old arguments as to why my organisation is different and why purchase orders couldn't work in our environment are seen to be disappearing. And most of you have online approval workflows. So again, some strides have been made here. Why bother? We want to make sure our spend's pre-approved and manage liabilities to facilitate the three-way match. Hopefully it's fairly straightforward argument, but I can tell you it was an argument 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago that we'd have to spend a lot of time with our clients talking with them as to why purchase orders are a good idea. Purchase orders are getting used as well across all spend types. Again, 5 or 6 years ago, there was lots of exceptions. The number of exceptions seems to be reducing, which makes sense. And for purchase orders to be effective, we need to make sure they are across all spend types. Credit card usage is high. Again, this is an increasing area around purchase cards, around credit cards, however you want to define them. A lot of people are driving low value spend to this. To the credit card piece. There's a big opportunity here to take some of that volume off the invoice processing piece and pushing it to the credit card. A lot of the hesitation previously around control or concerns on spend seems to be disappearing as people get more confidence with some of the systems that surround credit card facilities. Goods and services have been receded. Nearly everything within the organisation is being received properly, even if it is a service. We've been told previously by people we can't receive a service, but it's a fundamental control for all services to acknowledge that it's actually been receipted, and it seems as though people are improving in this regard. In terms of invoices being received centrally, still a little way off here. 77% of invoices are received centrally. Email's increasing, but some still accept manually. We even heard of some people in the study that were receiving things by fax. We threw out our fax machine about 8 or 9 years ago, and I did not know they still existed, but we saw there a number of invoices still coming through via fax, which really to me was quite a little bit shocking. Lots of organisations we also found didn't drive supplier compliance. And when we go out there and we say, well, we often hear, well, such and such wants to deliver their invoice in such a manner. And then you go out and you speak to those suppliers, and the suppliers are more than happy to change the way they interact if they're going to get paid quicker. So I think there's some work to be done around there in terms of driving the channels and getting your suppliers to be compliant with your processes, which in our experience we find they're more than willing to do. So I'd like to see this metric improve over the next 12 months. Invoice automation. Only 23% of you. This has been a really interesting area for us. It's an area where we've spent a bit of time over the years around invoice automation and all the solutions that are out there. 5 or 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, there was a whole lot of software companies and others that foresee the removal of manual workflows and driving a high level of OCR and workflow, etc. There seems to be a little bit of hesitation because over time, you'd think in the last 5 years with the advances in technology that there'd be a massive uptake in this sort of these sort of solutions, but really they seem to be staying pretty static. We're not too sure if it's because the solutions still haven't reached a point of maturity, if people don't see the benefits, or what some of those issues are. But it's quite interesting to see that the automation piece isn't upticking as you'd expect. In terms of the key areas that all of you indicated, though, were impacting performance, and you look at that last finding, and then you look at the first one here, the top area impacting performance was the level of manual work. And you say to yourself, well, there's a whole lot of solutions out there, and again, I guess there's a few questions there. The lack of system functionality to help support the process, issues with purchase order compliance, business engagement around this as a function, and then issues around receipting. So there's some of the key areas that were identified as part of the study of impacting performance. And it goes down to some of the other pieces that contribute to that. As I said, there's a whole lot more in the actual reports themselves on each of these areas. Jumping into payroll then, and some of the key observations around payroll. Employee set up a master file. It's still a highly manual process, and again, this is something that over the years you'd expect to see getting further automated. And it's an interesting thing that when we look across our client base, that the more small to medium companies seem to have embraced this a whole lot more than the medium to large businesses that still seem to be resting on some processes from a few years ago. There is a bit of a reduction, but still there's a long way to go to start getting those manual files into an electronic format. There's a lack of a single employee file. Often information is distributed across multiple parts of the business. This is fairly important, and you often find issues or industrial relations pieces or contractual issues with employees, and you're looking for that piece of information and you're unable to find it. Again, interesting that this information is still distributed through the organisation, and some of these improvements still have a fair way to go. The files kept in a variety of formats, from hard copies to document files to shared drives. Some of you do have HR systems with bits and pieces in it. Again, some improvements still to be made around these areas that we've seen consistently over the last couple of years. Timesheet standardization has improved. It seems as though that is something that's going forward. You've got better standardized with your processes, and that enables you to get better efficiency and control in time management. Time and attendance capture, it's still highly manual. Again, some consistent themes across all these processes. They're still highly manual. Look, I often hear things around robotics and things such as that, which is apparently the new word of the month. And you listen to those sort of things, and then you reflect on the reality. And the reality is that we've got manual processes with manual documentation. I think the pie in the sky concept of some of those areas is still a fair way off when we look at where most of you are. I'm sure some of you are making inroads and those sort of things are coming to the fore, but for me at the moment, there's still some of these basic pieces that need to be fixed before even some of those things can be considered. Payslip delivery methods. Employee self-service has been increasing in usage. I think most organisations seem to be getting towards a level of employee self-service. Payslips, though, are still delivered in a variety of formats, and some are still in the mail. Again, you think the business case would be pretty straightforward. Add up the cost of mail, start emailing. So still some actions and activities to happen there. Some of the key areas then on payroll impacting performance, again, we see it at number one, and this is the thing that kind of shocks us over the years, that again at number one, the level of manual work, same as purchase to pay. The lack of systems capability as well to deliver some of the things that we want, accuracy around time and attendance, and some data integrity issues around this. Moving on to some of the functional observations on receivables that we can talk through. Around the credit assessment piece, while most of you get signed terms and conditions, only around half of you had any form of credit scoring. Pretty important to actually think about the customers we're engaging with from a debtor perspective and making sure that we actually review them properly. A consistent theme across all the process areas that the customer file storage is often manual across different locations with a combination of electronic and hard copy storage methods. We've seen lots of examples in our work of clients not being able to find contracts, not being able to find signed terms as issues have come up. We spent a whole lot of time going through processes to get these standard service agreements and other pieces in place. Pretty important for us to make sure that they're filed appropriately. Most people, though, felt as though their credit assessment was pretty good, and I think that one of the things that when we start to look at the metrics, I think we'll start to see that Australia, in terms of days sales outstanding, is doing an okay job. So most of you felt pretty good around this area. The invoice and statement process is still highly manual, and I'm often shocked that when I speak to clients that they'll be emailing out invoices and then mailing out statements. Only a few of you have portals or other areas to log on. Again, maybe some really easy wins here in getting these into an electronic format and getting them out. Most systems have the capability to actually do that. So if you're sitting there mailing, and I know an organisation that mails and puts pretty stamps on them, maybe that's not the way of the future. I know for myself, if invoices show up and they're sitting in the letterbox, they take a lot longer to get to. If they've come in electronically, they're going to be captured, they're going to be dealt with, and hopefully they're going to go into a level of workflow. So I think it's probably a pretty easy win there for most of us. If we look at the standard trading terms, which match to the supplier side, most of you have 30-day terms on the receivable side, which matches to the supplier side, which makes sense. Not many of you using early settlement discounts. This hasn't really changed over the years, and look, this might be a question I think we might drop off in the future. Most of you noted that the administration effort outweighs the benefit, and so it's not something you've really pursued. Most of you said that your collections processes are average or strong, which is good to hear. There's a whole variety of channels, but nearly all of you always use the telephone, and collections agencies seem to be a big part of the collections process. So I think most of you are fairly confident around the debtor cycle. That being said, there's a lack of collections automation. A lot of you go through processes, of reviewing aging and other pieces, but again, automating the AR process, and there's a whole lot of tools out there to do this. It's still a pretty highly manual process, going through those trial balances, reviewing specific customers, and then calling them up to have a discussion with them. The key areas impacting performance. Look, I would have liked to have said that we intentionally did this for all three to make a point, but this is different from other years. But again, it's the level of manual work across every process area. The number one key area impacting performance is the level of manual work. And you think to yourself, by the same token, on purchase to pay, on payroll, and on receivables, the embracing of automation, the embracing of technology still has a fair way to go. So hopefully, again, we'll start to see some inroads in this regard over the next 12 to 18 months. A few of you had some issues too around issues with billing and some other data integrity issues. But again, there's the level of manual work that's the standout across all of these areas of study. In terms of the future strategy then, of what are the things that you're actually thinking about that you're going to look to in the future? If we look across purchase to pay, people want to get better at operational reporting. They want to get better at providing reports back to the business on how it's actually going. They want to get better in terms of defining SLAs and engaging and agreeing those with the business. You'll see a consistent theme around documenting procedures, making sure processes are well defined, including policies, procedures, business rules, so we can get these processes to rise above being the individuals that deliver the process and creating the performance, and having processes that deliver the performance. And some of you want to embark upon EDI and start getting better at that electronic transfer. The ones in red there as we go down are the ones that require some automation. So one of the things that we stressed each year is that when you look at these future strategy areas, all of these process and structure areas, we know that system change takes time, it takes investment, it takes organizational support. But a lot of these process and structure questions and issues can be more readily addressed in a far quicker manner. If we look on payroll in terms of the future strategy, employee management self-service, that's the number one. It seems as though that's where everyone's focused for the next year. It was the absolute standout. So for those of you that don't have it in place, it's either you want to get it in place, or for those of you that do, you actually want to improve how it actually works. A lot of you want to get better at time and attendance systems, and again, we've got that evergreen documentation of procedures. We want to get better at the electronic file, as well as providing payroll reporting back to the business. So again, some big system changes in there as well, but some basics around procedures and process that should be readily able to be addressed. Around receivables, number one by a long shot was DSO reduction, obviously a bit of a focus area. And one of the interesting things for us always is when you look at an organisation is to look at the cost of that DSO, look at that cost of working capital of the amount that you've got outstanding. And it's one of the great ways where a finance organisation can go back and demonstrate bottom line impact to the business. If we have X dollars outstanding at a working capital rate of Y, we can pretty much easily calculate how much that DSO is costing us. And if we can bring that DSO in, we can talk about how that actually impacts the bottom line of the organisation. There's some work around standardising process. So this is one of the few areas where that was a key area of focus. Getting invoices and statements online rather than having the person that puts the pretty stamps on them and sending them out at the end of the month. Probably not a role that we'll see in 2020, I would hope. We need to improve some of these processes and improve some of our reporting around these areas. And right down the chain there, not many of you are that interested in implementing collection systems or automated systems, but that surely is an opportunity for the future. In terms of cross-functional themes, these are themes that came across all four areas. Everyone wanted to get better at reporting to support business decisions. They want to be able to provide better reports back to the business. They also want to be able to provide better reports on the function itself, so to be able to identify what's working well, what's not working well. But importantly, it's often difficult for organizations to see when a finance function is improving, that if we can measure ourselves better and we can plot over time improvements, that gives us something to go back to the business to demonstrate how we're supporting them and how we're improving them. Some areas around standardizing process as well. Some of you still want to get a little bit better than that at that, even though most of you had got to a fairly consistent baseline. Everyone wanted to get better at documenting policies, procedures, etc. I think that's a theme that will live on forever. Documentation is one of those things that even if you've got it to a point in 12 to 18 months' time, it's probably dropped off that point. And automation, considering the automation opportunities drive further efficiencies. So these are some of the cross-functional themes that we saw across each of the areas of study. Now the metrics, this is the one area that everyone always seems to find the most favourite, and that's why we've kind of left it till towards the back end of the presentation. There's a whole lot of other metrics for those of you that are on the presentation that didn't participate, and I would encourage you to participate next year. But for those of you that did participate, when you get the reports, you'll see that there's a whole lot more metrics and measures and analysis above and beyond what I'm going to be sharing with you today. In terms of the metrics, we've got three levels: good, average, and poor. Good is the top quartile, so the top 25%. Average is the middle two quartiles, and poor is the lower quartile, so below 25%. If we have a look at invoices, then if we look at purchase to pay first as a snapshot, if we look at the invoices per full-time equivalent, these are improved a little bit over time, but still hover around some of the same areas. We've got an average or a median there of 11,400 invoices per FTE, 17,757 for good. So that means anyone that's in the top 25% will be processing more than 17,757 invoices per accounts payable FTE. I can let you know that there's organisations in the top 15, the top 10% that perform well and above that, starting to hit 25,000, 30,000 invoices per FTE. What are they doing different? They've got strong purchase order penetration. They've got a high level of automation. They're getting invoices electronically. They've got standard payment terms. They've got a whole lot of processes set up to make sure that they can get to that sort of level. If we look around purchase order penetration, again, there's a one-to-one correlation with those that have better purchase order penetration and those that have high-performing invoice per full-time equivalent. And the good is above 92%, getting down the poor towards 34%. Payroll metric snapshot, as I said, on the purchase to pay, there's a range of other metrics within that report, but we've just picked out a couple to share with you as part of this webinar. On the payroll side, headcount process per payroll FTE. On the good end, we have 513, going down to the poor end of 217. So this is the number. It's total headcount divided by the number of payrolls processed per FTE. The next metric takes that and then says, well, not every payroll is equal. You could have weekly, fortnightly, monthly. So let's look at the number of payrolls processed per payroll FTE. And you can see those numbers there going up to 1,165 down to poor at 360. Each of these metrics has improved over the last 12 months. They've all gone up a little bit, so that payroll functions are obviously getting a little bit more efficient. Receivables, days sales outstanding. This is one that everyone always looks upon. And interestingly enough, last year we had a discussion at a client that suggested that our results might not be indicative of the Australian market, and our results landed nearly dead on the same results that Standard & Poor's had, which was 43.2 for Standard & Poor's, and we were on 43. So the average or the median day sales outstanding for this year is 41, so there's been an improvement. So across Australia, it seems as though we've had a drop of about 2 days on DSO, and I think that is the benchmark that we should be working towards. Percentage of payments received electronically, we're pretty much at a point now where everyone is receiving payments electronically. This is an area where over the last 5 years we've seen the uptick, and those manual payments are slowly disappearing. As I said, they're just some of the quick metrics in the constraints of the webinar today. There was only we couldn't share the whole report with you. In terms of the report distribution, and I would like to thank those of you that participated this year. As we've always said, it's those that participate that get a copy of the report. If you didn't participate, we'd love you to participate next year, or there's options to purchase the reports. What does the report contain? Look, it contains the metrics that we've talked about already today. It contains a whole host of other metrics. It also contains some better practice guidance. It provides some thoughts on, well, what do you need to do to actually go from standard, from average to good? And what are some of the things that people that are high performing are doing? So let's put some ideas in there that you can then take back and perhaps measure your organization against. It also provides some commentary. It's nice to sit here and have some metrics, and I've been able to provide a bit of a commentary today, but again, in a webinar format and in the time we have, it needs to be a little bit higher level. We can't delve too deeply into some of these areas. Hopefully the report goes down to the next level to provide some analysis and insight and thoughts on how people are achieving things. It also contains some further information around the future strategy and some commentary around that as to who's doing what and why they may be doing it. In terms of the reports, they're all completed, they're all ready to go. We're waiting to have the webinar today to share some of the results with you. We'll be distributing them out to those that participated on Monday. If you didn't participate, you can get online and you can purchase them off our website at australianbenchmarks.com. As well as that, we promised that as part of this that we would provide report cards, which for those that participated is an assessment of your responses that you provided us last year. And I know some of you may have forgotten what you responded, but a summary of some of those responses that you gave us against some of the measures and metrics that we came up with this year. Looking forward to 2017, and as I said, I thank those of you that are online that that did participate, but I'd also I'd like to push for those of you that are online today that didn't participate to be part of the study. While we're happy to sell you a report, we'd be more than we'd actually rather you actually participate in the study so we can get some better insights, we can get some better information, and we can improve the quality of these reports over time. We'll be launching the 2017 study in September. To ensure we contact you, make sure that we have you on our list. Register australianbenchmarks.com. If you've already participated, you're already on that list, but feel free to share that around with others as part of making sure we can build a bigger community over time. We'd also like to think about other events that we can run over the year to start getting some better sharing of information and sharing of process and structure. Look, I'd also welcome at any point in time, as I said, we've gone through a fair bit here fairly quickly today. The reports will be coming out. My name's Jamie McBrien. I'm always happy to take calls, emails, or come out and have a discussion with any of you about what we're seeing in the market. Our expertise is in the finance organisation, operating models, process and structures. We advise a lot of Australia's leading businesses in those areas. And I'm always willing, or any of my colleagues are always more than willing, to come out and have a discussion with you as to how some of these things can get applied in the context of your business and how you can drive performance and improvement going forward. You should all have my contact details, so feel free to get in contact with me. And again, thank you for being part of it in 2016. We look forward to you all being part of it in 2017 and hope to see you then.